Hello there and welcome! So, yesterday the Legion Shaman class preview was released, and it contained a good amount of information regarding how my favourite class will be changing in the next expansion. I would like to make videos about how every class is changing, but that's not really feasible because I don't know every class as well as I'd like to. So that's going to be a goal of mine going into Legion, kind of in the future, but for now let's just focus on the Shaman, since I know it best and I've already had the time to consider the changes. You see, while I was attending BlizzCon, which was awesome, by the way, I was able to have a fairly lengthy, casual one-on-one conversation with some of the developers, and I learned a couple of the changes coming for Shaman a few days before the official blog was released. So, the class changes are really focused on the fantasy of each specific class, making it feel like you're playing the particular class rather than something homogenized and lacking any kind of uniqueness. To be fair, the Shaman hasn't really suffered from a lack of class fantasy as much as other classes, but most of the problems are mechanical, and there are a lot of changes I feel need to be made to enhance how the damage-dealing specialization aspects of the class play. It helps that I just finished reading Lord of the Clans by Christy Golden, which talks a lot about how shamanism works, so I'm in the zone. Let's do this. So I have the blog in front of me, and let's just start going over it. So, for millennia, since the primitive tribal cultures of Azeroth and Draenor, the natural elements of the physical universe have been celebrated, feared, and even worshipped. Mystics sought communion with the earth, air, fire, and water, and learned to tap into their raw power. In time, these spiritual guides came to understand that nature's elemental forces aren't wholly benevolent, but have in fact been locked in an unending conflict of chaos and primal fury that once consumed the physical realm. So began the calling of the Shaman, to bring balance to these volatile energies, leveraging their intensity to mend wounds, or inflict them. So, let's talk about the big one, the big thing with Shaman. The kind of unique thing when you think about Shaman, you think totems. Now, totems have always had the problem of being clunky. Basically, since I can remember, people have been complaining that Shaman totems are clunky and a bit difficult to control, and it's just been a bit of a mess. So, once again, Blizzard is taking a stab at making totems a bit easier to use, making them cooler, making them something you're excited about. To quote the blog, "The use of totems is integral to the Shaman archetype, and we're addressing some persistent issues with their mechanics. For a long time, there have been significant constraints associated with totems, like the fact that they can only be dropped at the Shaman's feet, or that they only have 5 health, or that no more than one of the same elemental type can be active at one time. While these constraints were intended to ensure that totems felt unique, they ultimately drove us to creating strange tools to allow the Shaman to bypass such constraints, such as totemic projection or totemic persistence. In Legion, we're eliminating this awkwardness and simply removing the constraints. Totems of the same nature type can now be summoned together, allowing you to have, say, Healing Stream Totem and Healing Tide Totem up at the same time. Elementals are no longer tied to totems, but are guardians that follow and assist you. Totems' maximum health will always equal a percentage of your maximum health. In addition, totems that need to be placed at a specific location will be directly placed using a targeting reticule. If you want to place Earthgrab Totem in the middle of a big pack of nasty orcs, you can do that without having to run into that nastiness or use a separate spell to throw the totem there. In general, totem mechanics are concentrated around temporary effects, either beneficial or hostile, in a localized area, as opposed to a maintenance buff cooldown that you need to make sure is up at all times. Wow, that seems like a pretty good way of bypassing some of the clunkiness of totems, just making each totem's utility and their kind of purpose baked into how you cast them. So the example they gave with Earthgrab Totem is very nice, because a problem I've always had with totems in Warlords of Draenor has been that totemic projection, the talent that allows you to move your totems around, is basically mandatory. For every Shaman, the ability to move something like an Earthgrab Totem or a Capacitor Totem has always been very important, because a lot of the times you're just not going to want to wade into the area where you want to put the totem. And for Restoration specifically, the ability to move around your Spirit Link Totem is massive. So I'm curious how that's going to work with the changes to totems. Will something like Spirit Link Totem no longer be able to be moved? Which, in my opinion, would not be so great, because there are a lot of good situations where you can project your Spirit Link Totem into the melee to allow the melee and the tanks to survive together, or to move it in between groups as it's about to run out to help split up health and stabilize the raid. So if they removed that functionality, I would be a little bit disappointed. But we don't know either way how that's going to work. In general, the new idea of having the totem be able to be moved just as part of what it is, putting it down in a location, that's really nice. I like that. And it really does ask the question, what's that going to do to our talents? Because I asked the class designer at BlizzCon, I was like, so what's going to happen with Shaman talents? Because they're a big kind of problem area for the class, and if you bake totems in like this, what's it going to do? And basically they've been talking a lot about having more choices that are about throughput. So that should allow things to be a bit more interesting. I'm sure there will be totems in the talents, because one thing right now is the fact that totems are no longer constrained by, the same type. You can now summon all kinds of different totems, there's no cap on them. That's really nice. But there aren't really too many situations consistently where you have to worry about that. I would say Restoration is one of the biggest one with Healing Stream and Healing Tide. Kind of sucks as a Restoration Shaman to have to replace Healing Stream with Healing Tide because you haven't gotten the most out of your Healing Stream. And if you accidentally press Healing Stream while Healing Tide's up, you're just crying because you've wasted a huge cooldown. But that said, other than things like Searing and Magma Totem, and maybe Grounding and Capacitor, there aren't loads of situations where you find yourself going, oh, I replaced one totem with another, oh, it's terrible. At least that's my personal experience. It's curious to note here that they've mentioned maintenance buff kind of cooldowns you need to make sure are up at all times are kind of going away. Hopefully this means the death of Searing and Magma Totem, because I do not find the gameplay of those interesting. I don't like having to keep up Searing Totem. I don't find it particularly fun. It's something you can do on the move, but having just beaten Zul'Harak on Mythic as an Elemental Shaman, it's a very intense fight. And I don't really like the fact that I have to stop using Chain Lightning, Lava Burst, and all my big spells to just go and put down a Searing Totem that just kind of goes bleh. Every kind of seconds, just bleh. It's just not all that interesting. So hopefully it means the death of those totems, and we can replace them with more interesting ones. So that's good. It's interesting to note that elementals are no longer tied to totems and are guardians that will follow and assist you. So this begs the question, are they temporary? It says guardian, which kind of suggests that it will be temporary, but I'm curious to see how that's going to work, because I kind of like the idea of a permanent elemental. I like that, personally. I think that's kind of cool. Maybe we'll get like a talent as elemental or enhancement, or just in general, that allows us to have a permanent elemental wandering around with us. That would be awesome. But that's kind of all the stuff I think about totems. I think it's a great change. It's very exciting. And yeah, I like it. I like the fact that they're baking in totemic persistence and totemic projection into the totems themselves. As long as they work well, and as long as there are choices you can make in terms of things like big cooldowns like Spirit Link Totem, I hope that you can place that at the very least, because it kind of would suck, I think, to not be able to move Spirit Link around. But that might just be a casualty of war when it comes to the changes. So in general, love the totem changes. So, next big thing, Maelstrom, the new DPS Shaman resource. To quote the blog, we're bringing needed clarity to Shaman resources, particularly to move away from disguising a couple key resources as buffs. Lightning Shield charges for Elemental Shaman, Maelstrom weapon charges for Enhancement Shaman, and Mana have all been replaced for Elemental and Enhancement with a new resource, Maelstrom. Mana is a fitting Restoration Shaman resource and will remain for that spec. So, a couple of questions first of all that have not been answered in this blog. What's the maximum Maelstrom cap? Like, is it 100, 200, 300, whatever? What is it? I don't know, because a couple of spells seem to suggest that it's 100, which would be fine. I'm fine with that. And I think having mana as for Restoration, that's all fine. Restoration in general, I think, doesn't need too much tweaking, because the spot that it's in right now, I think, is pretty good. But we'll get onto the actual spec-specific stuff in just a bit. So Maelstrom in general, yay, I'm really happy, I'm really excited, because it's not much fun having to track a buff as opposed to having this cool resource. I hope it has a cool kind of bar, and I hope the add-on authors out there will make cool things like cool weak auras, like lightning bolt kind of bars and stuff. Pretty cool. I really like that. I'm excited for that. So, yeah, it's good that we won't have to track as much stuff, and it'll be more kind of baked into the resource, into how you play. So, let's get into the specs now, starting with Elemental. So, to quote the gameplay section of the blog, Elemental Shaman already have a strong thematic ability repertoire. We're retaining much of that existing gameplay in Legion, while smoothing the rough edges. The previously mentioned switch to Maelstrom as a resource is most significant. Elemental Shaman will build Maelstrom through their Lightning Bolt, Lava Burst, and Chain Lightning abilities, and spend it on abilities like Shocks and Earthquake. This change also allows us to remove the cooldown on Shocks, since they instead compete for resources. Shock usage is now more flexible for Elemental Shaman, such as using more of their Maelstrom on Flame Shock to dot multiple targets. Another notable change is the return of Elemental Overload as their mastery. Molten Earth never lived up to our hopes, being too non-interactive and confusing. So, let's go over the abilities that they have mentioned, and then we'll kind of talk about it in general. Lightning Bolt, 40-yard range, 2-second cast. Fires a bolt of lightning at the target, dealing moderate nature damage and generating 15 Maelstrom. Lava Burst, 40-yard range, 2-second cast, 8-second cooldown. Hurl molten lava at the target, dealing strong fire damage. If your Flame Shock is on the target, Lava Burst will deal 50% additional damage. Generates 15 Maelstrom. Flame Shock, 0 to 20 Maelstrom, 45-yard range, instant. Sears the target with fire, causing minor fire damage and then additional minor fire damage every 2 seconds. Lasts 10 to 30 seconds based upon Maelstrom spent. Earth Shock, 10 to 100 Maelstrom, 45-yard range, instant. Instantly shocks the target with concussive force, causing massive nature damage, based upon Maelstrom spent. Lava Surge, passive. Your Flame Shock damage over time has a chance to reset the cooldown of Lava Burst and cause your next Lava Burst to be instant. Mastery, Elemental Overload. Grants a 40%, with Mastery from typical gear, chance for Elemental Overload to occur. Elemental Overload causes a Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, or Lava Burst spell you cast to trigger a second, similar spell on the same target that causes 75% of normal damage and Maelstrom generation, and no threat. So those are the example abilities. Kind of disappointed they didn't include Earthquake, because that's going to be a big one, I feel. They did mention in the kind of overview that we will be spending Maelstrom on Earthquake, so hopefully we won't have to rely upon Chain Lightning. One piece of feedback I've always had about Elemental and Warlords of Draenor is that it always sucks to have to rely upon those 3 targets to have a hard cap of you cannot AoE effectively unless there are 3 targets and unless they are clumped up so that you can Chain Lightning them. And in a lot of fights, that just means that you're kind of stuck there not being able to AoE, which is a real shame. So hopefully Earthquake will be moved more towards being Maelstrom focused, so it consumes Maelstrom, as opposed to consuming enhanced Chain Lightning buff, essentially. So, I really like the changes to shocks. Really cool. I love it. I really love it. I'm so glad that finally shocks no longer have a cooldown. We can finally multi-dot. It seems like 0 to 20 Maelstrom, that's not a big cost, considering Lightning Bolt and Lava Burst generate 15 Maelstrom, and they're it's essentially multi-strikes. Since they're multi-strikes, the Mastery will generate more. You can essentially get enough for one Flame Shock if your Mastery triggers once on one of your spells, which is nice. So you can multi-dot fairly effectively, which is good. And if you have lots of single targets that need to all die, they're all spread out, you can get Flame Shock up on all of them, bang, 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 bang. Something like Kilrog, if you're in that kind of situation, you can get those Flame Shocks out nice and quickly and do plenty of lava bursting, and you'll get lots of lava surges, which will be very nice. So in those situations where you need to single target lots of enemies down, having the no cooldown on Flame Shock is going to be massive. When it comes to Earth Shock, it costs 10 to 100 Maelstrom, so you will not be able to just cast it endlessly. I like the idea. It's really cool. I don't really see too many problems with it. Assuming that 100 Maelstrom is our cap, it seems like the whole spec's going to play fast, which is nice. So it's going to kind of work like Heroic Strike in a way. You're going to use it to control your Maelstrom, make sure you don't kind of spend too much. So it seems like it will basically just spend the remainder of your Maelstrom, which I like. I think that's fine. And in those situations where you say you're at like 95 Maelstrom, you have to get your Flame Shock out because you want to get, big, powerful Flame Shock out. And you also have to get your Earth Shock out because you don't want to cap. You can just spend the Maelstrom on the Flame Shock, go back to 95, 100 with your spells, and then just Earth Shock it away. So you don't really have that problem. You don't have the cooldown of shocks constraining you. You don't have to think, oh, well, my Earth Shock is now off cooldown, and I have 20 stacks of Lightning Shield, but oh god, I also need to get my Flame Shock out. Which one's more important? I have to consider if I have the Trinket, what the situation is, what do I do? Now it's more about how you play, and about the situation, and about what you want to do, as opposed to having the spells controlling you, which I really, really like. So, shock changes, mwah, I love them. Mastery, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with us being the only one that can multi-strike. It's nice. It'll be nice to have that uniqueness again. Hopefully we'll still be able to Emperor Palpatine some fools like we were in Mists of Pandaria. That was great fun. It seems like stat-wise we're going to care more about Mastery. Definitely Mastery is probably going to be our biggest thing. It's going to be our new #1 stat, just like in Mists of Pandaria. And it also seems like we're going to get a little bit more out of crit, because the thing about the Lava Burst change is it at no point mentioned that it always critically strikes, which has always been a part of Lava Burst, so it's going to be interesting to see if they take that out, what it's going to mean. Obviously, the spell will be tuned around that, but hopefully it will allow us to gain more out of Critical Strike, which is nice, because Critical Strike has always had that caveat of, but it doesn't affect Lava Burst. Blizzard had a kind of patch fix for that, but it's not really noticeable, and it doesn't make crit your super lovely stat. I don't think it should be, but it's nice that we should hopefully get a little bit more out of it with the change to Lava Burst. One problem with Elemental has always been that if they multi-struck too much, they would just kill fools instantly in PvP. So hopefully some of these changes will allow us to still be relevant in PvP without, sucking, essentially. I can't speak too much for how Elemental PvP works, and I don't want to make this video any longer than it already is. So let's quickly look at the example talent they gave before moving on. Maelstrom Totem, 40-yard range, instant, 30-second cooldown. Summons a Maelstrom Totem near the target for 15 seconds that repeatedly attacks an enemy within 30 yards for moderate nature damage. Every time the Maelstrom Totem attacks, it will generate 5 Maelstrom for you. So that's just a nice idea of a talent. I think it's cool. Bit of AoE added there. So my general thoughts for Elemental is I like the change. It should free up the spec a lot. Don't know what's going to happen with things like Frost Shock or Earthquake. We'll just have to wait and see. I like it. Let's see how it works in the beta. In terms of feedback, I would say I want to see how the rest of the class works. I would really like to see a removal of the dependency of 3 targets for Chain Lightning, because there's always that moment when you're not sure if the 3 targets you hope it will hit are close enough for Chain Lightning to jump. I really don't like the feeling of, well, let's just wing it and hope that you get it, and then you have to sit there casting Earthquake and you feel like a fool because Earthquake deals so little damage without the buff. It's literally a 300% damage increase if you get the buff necessary if you want to deal damage with Earthquake, and it removes the cast time. It just doesn't feel good because you feel so weak if you just miss the Chain Lightning getting onto 3 targets, and that's not your fault. Some of the time you can change what target you start the Chain Lightning on to hopefully it will jump in the right direction, but most of the time it's up to the tanks, and unless you have super good communication with the tanks, which isn't going to happen all the time, let's be honest with that, they've got their own things to worry about, it's going to really suck. So I really hope that either they find a way to, remove the Chain Lightning dependency for a powerful Earthquake, or make Chain Lightning more reliable. I've always liked the idea of Fork Lightning. It will still hit the same amount of targets and deal the same amount of damage, but the way it fires is different, so that you have a cone in front of you with the same range. You can actually, hit the multiple targets so they're a bit more spread out, so you can still get that Earthquake. It would definitely severely reduce the chances of you going, oh, it should have hit, but it didn't. Well, I guess I'm just screwed. So that's Elemental. Moving on to Enhancement. Now let's quote and get going. The identity of the Enhancement Shaman is cool, but we don't feel that the mechanics do well to establish that. We want the spec to be more than a melee-ranged Elemental Shaman, while having a distinct Battle Mage feel. Enhancement's niche focuses on dishing out devastating spells and punishing strikes at melee range to destroy their enemy. Rather than leaving you with a multitude of buttons, many of which are inconsequential, we're emphasizing empowering your weapons and allies in the fray. Enhancement Shaman become increasingly deadly as they build their power through Maelstrom generation. They must be careful not to let it overflow, while maintaining enough to utilize their most dominant attacks at critical moments. Let's have a look at some of their abilities now. Rock Biter. 10-yard range, instant. Assaults your target with earthen power, dealing moderate nature damage, and generating 15 Maelstrom. Flame Tongue. 10-yard range, instant. 12-second cooldown. Scorch your target with fiery power, dealing moderate fire damage and enhancing your weapons. Each of your weapon attacks cause up to minor additional fire damage based upon weapon speed. Lasts for 16 seconds. Wind Fury. Passive. Each of your main hand attacks has a 7% chance of triggering 3 extra attacks, dealing minor physical damage. Lava Lash. 30 Maelstrom, melee range, instant. Charge your offhand weapon with lava and strike your target, dealing strong fire damage. Storm Strike. 60 Maelstrom, melee range, instant, 16-second cooldown. Energize your weapons with lightning and deliver a massive blow to your target, dealing heavy physical damage. Maelstrom Weapon. Passive. When you deal damage with a melee weapon, you generate 5 Maelstrom. Storm Fury. Passive. Each of your attacks has a 2% chance to cause Storm Fury, resetting the cooldown on Storm Strike and causing your next Storm Strike to cost 50% less Maelstrom and to trigger no cooldown. Mastery Enhanced Elements. Increases the chance for Storm Fury and Wind Fury to trigger by 5% with Mastery from typical gear, and increases all fire and nature damage done by 40% with Mastery from typical gear. First kind of thoughts, it feels fast. It feels like it's going to be a very fast spec. With Storm Strike costing 60 Maelstrom, it seems like that's going to be your big slam spell, your big I hit you really hard spell, and things like Rock Biter, Flame Tongue are going to be your constant spenders and generators and, just things you press all the time. So Rock Biter doesn't look like it has a cooldown, which is really nice. Generates a lot of Maelstrom. It feels like you're going to generate Maelstrom really fast. You generate 15 Maelstrom from Rock Biter. You constantly generate Maelstrom with Maelstrom weapons. It's going to be a really fast spec. So it seems like you're going to have to go into a rotation of, constantly generating this Maelstrom, spending it on Stormstrike when the cooldown is available. When it's not, you instead spend it on Lava Lash. So it seems like Lava Lash is kind of the bastardized offspring of Stormstrike, which has always been the case, but that is just kind of the nature of it. So obviously Stormstrike is going to be your big one. You're going to be using that as much as you can. And then when it's not available, you use Lava Lash instead to keep your Maelstrom from capping. And of course, you'll be watching out for Storm Fury procs, resetting the cooldown on Stormstrike, and you just go nuts with it. So a couple of things. Haven't seen any mention of Searing or Magma Totem, which is good, in my opinion. Those can go away, in my opinion. Hopefully, they will, because they're not too much fun. They have also not mentioned anything of shocks. So we do not know if shocks are going to be a thing with enhancement, and if that happens, what on earth is their AoE going to be? Because you'll notice, no mention of their AoE, no mention of the iconic Flame Shock, Lava Lash, Flame Shocks on everyone, and then Fire Nova, everyone explodes. No mention of that. So that's going to be interesting to see how it works. We have no mention of it. I don't know if shocks are really necessary. I like the idea of Rock Biter and Flame Tongue. Those were the names of the old kind of buff spells you'd put on your weapon back in, very early vanilla BC Wrath of the Lich King kind of Shaman. So I like the idea of harkening back to that with different ways of doing it. That's cool. I like the idea of you're using a bit of earthen power, then some flame, then some lightning. Pretty cool stuff. I like it. I'm not really sure how AoE is going to be handled into this, or, if shocks are going to be part of it, or if, they're going to also have a guardian, like an elemental, constantly with them to add to this. We have no idea. So it's going to be interesting, definitely, to see what's going on here, because they haven't really given us too much. I mean, it seems like they've talked a lot about the single target rotation, which is nice, but they have not mentioned AoE, and AoE is the big part of enhancement. That's one of the biggest parts. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do. Other than that, I don't really have too many problems with it. It seems like it's going to be a fast spec, a very fun spec. A lot of the spells, like Rock Biter and Flame Tongue, they have a 10-yard range rather than melee range, which is very interesting. It's to kind of build a bit more of that Battle Mage feel. You can still do some damage while not entirely in melee range, which is nice. It's nice that you can continue doing your rotation while maybe moving just a little bit out of mechanics and stuff, which is good. It seems like you're also going to have to keep up the buff of Flame Tongue as much as you can. It has a 12-second cooldown, and its buff lasts 16 seconds, so I don't see that being a problem as long as you use it on cooldown. Has a bit of a grace period as well, so I don't really see that being too much of an issue. But yeah, I don't really have any other thoughts. It just seems like a fast spec, and that's always been enhancement in my opinion. It's been a fast spec. Reducing the amount of sources of damage, so Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt, Storm Strike, Lava Lash, your shocks, just reducing that into a more kind of core rotation. I like that idea. I've always thought enhancement has been a bit spread when it comes to its damage sources. So, as it stands, we don't know enough to make a judgment call yet. But what I see so far, I like. So, an example of their talents, they give you 1 talent per spec. So, let's look at the enhancement one. It is Sundering, 60 Maelstrom, instant, 20-second cooldown. Shatter a line of earth before you, causing strong physical damage and knocking enemies to the side. Just like Thrall's ultimate from Heroes of the Storm. I'm glad they're taking inspiration from those games, because Heroes of the Storm looks awesome, especially with some of their spells. I want Elemental Earthquake to look like Thrall's Earthquake in Heroes of the Storm, because that looks awesome. But yeah, looks cool, I like it. A bit of crowd control in there for a little bit of added kind of utility. I like it. So let's move on to Restoration. Now, the quote shall be, "Restoration mechanics are informed well by the themes of the spec, and we want to avoid disrupting what healers already like about it. What has changed has primarily been in terms of tweaking their gameplay in more fun directions. There's now slightly more emphasis on targeted healing and slightly less on chain heal spam. We've also significantly improved their talents, offering more impactful and varied options. Additionally, Restoration gains the most from the removal of totem restrictions." Now let's talk about a few of their abilities that they've given us examples of. Healing Wave, 2.1% mana, 40-yard range, 2.5 second cast time. A slow but efficient wave of healing energy that restores a moderate amount of a friendly target's health. Healing Surge, 4.1% mana, 40-yard range, 1.5 second cast. A quick but expensive surge of healing energy that restores a moderate amount of a friendly target's health. Chain Heal, 5.6% mana, 40-yard range, 2.5 second cast. Heals the friendly target for a moderate amount, then jumps to heal the most injured nearby party or raid members. Healing is reduced by 30% after each jump, heals 4 total targets. Riptide, 1.5% mana, 40-yard range, instant, 6-second cooldown. Restorative waters wash over a friendly target, healing them for a moderate amount and an additional moderate amount over 18 seconds. Healing Rain, 4.3% mana, 40-yard range, 2-second cast, 10-second cooldown. Blanket the targeted area in healing rains, restoring a moderate amount of health to up to 6 allies in the area over 10 seconds. Healing Stream Totem, 1.7% mana, instant, 30-second cooldown. Summons a water totem at the feet of the shaman that heals an injured party or raid member within 40 yards for a minor amount every 2 seconds. Lasts 15 seconds. Tidal Waves, passive. When you cast Chain Heal or Riptide, you gain the Tidal Waves effect, which reduces the cast time of your next healing wave by 40%, or increases the critical effect chance of your next healing surge by 40%. Stacks up to 2 times. Mastery, Deep Healing. Increases the potency of your healing spells by up to 60% with Mastery from typical gear, based upon the current health level of your target. Lower health targets are healed for more. Not really many changes there. They're basically going to be moving away from Chain Heal and more towards other spells. I'm fine with that. Chain Heal spam is cool, but it just kinda... that's it, really. You rely so much on Chain Heal, and I was talking with the class developer about this, and he said that they want to move away from that, not by making Chain Heal weaker, but by making your other spells stronger. So there's more of an incentive to, if you're tank healing or something, to not just go, oh, I'll just Chain Heal the tank instead of everyone else. No, you'll be using your single target spells more, which is great. The thing about the changes coming to Shaman in general, and Restoration specifically, is the talents. And talents are a huge part of the problem with Shamans right now. They're a bit of a mess. They're not spec-specific enough, and they basically said they're going to be changing that in Legion. They have not given every example, they're not telling us too much about how talents are going to change, just that they will change. So we can't really make a judgment call, especially on Restoration, which has a strong core toolkit. If you think about what the Restoration Shaman can do, right? They are inherently heroes because of the mastery. They inherently are better the worst situation you're in, so that's already good. They have their niche. They've got pretty good single target healing with Healing Wave and Healing Surge. Chain Heal is amazing for AoE healing. They've got sustained AoE healing with Healing Rain. They've got heal over time for Riptide. They've got smart healing with Healing Stream Totem. They've got great cooldowns. Healing Tide Totem is amazing. Spirit Link is amazing. Ascendance, okay, bit of feedback here. I don't like that Ascendance requires you to dump mana, basically. You have to spend so much mana to get the most out of Ascendance because you have to just spam Chain Heal to get loads of AoE healing going. I'd like to see some kind of mechanic with Ascendance that reduces the cost of spells while you're in the form, just to make it a little bit easier on the Shaman, especially earlier on, because when you're in low spirit, you don't have too much mana regeneration, earlier expansion. Ascendance is just not as strong. It very much depends upon your gear, so I'd like to see a bit of a safety mechanic put in place to allow Ascendance to kind of, just work a little bit better and not make it so you have to dump half your mana bar just to use your one cooldown. Although I do like the fact that you get what you put into it. So I still like that to be the case. It's still as effective as you want it to be, as much work as you want to put into it. But I still think there should be an easier barrier to entry when it comes to mana. It should still be something you should be able to use on 10% mana to, be a hero for the duration without, completely and utterly just going and 5 seconds in and just being like, well, the rest of this Ascendance is wasted. Other than that, I really don't have too much to say about Restoration. Like I said, a lot of the stuff is in the talents, so we need to see how the talents will change things. Right now, we just don't know. So I really don't think that Restoration needs too many changes. I like the idea of moving towards having a greater variety of your options, rather than just Chain Heal everywhere. Chain Heal's fun to a certain extent, but I've used it enough by now. I want to be able to think more about my other spells. I'm looking forward to going back to the start of an expansion where I have to think more about my mana consumption with Healing Wave and Surge, as opposed to just Chain Heal all day. I would argue that Restoration kind of suffers from being in a niche, but I think that niche is really strong, and Restoration Shaman are probably the best healers when it comes to saving a raid, in terms of just raw throughput, because if you're healing Tide Totem a raid that's low, you're going to save the entire bloody raid. I love that idea, and I'm okay with us not being so great on the meters, because the meters do not matter, so I'm fine with that. Like I said, talents, it's all about the talents, so I'm super excited to see what the talents are going to be. Speaking of talents, they have given one example. It's called Wellspring, costs 2.4% mana, has a 30-yard range, a 1.5-second cast time, and a 12-second cooldown. It creates a surge of water that flows forwards, healing all friendly targets in a wide arc in front of you for a strong amount. That's awesome! First of all, from a class fantasy perspective, that's cool. Here, have a literal healing tidal wave. Looks awesome. I can't wait to see what it looks like. I love it. 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 I want to see more stuff like that. If all the talents are like that, or a fair amount of them are like that, then Restoration is going to have a lot, and I mean a lot, of choices, which is awesome. One thing about Restoration, they do not have a tank cooldown, and I've been considering this, and I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. They already have so many strong abilities that I feel like they don't really need a tank cooldown, because it would kind of move them away from their niche a little bit of being that really strong raid healer. So I'm okay with that. They already have the mastery that allows them to save tanks that are low as long as they react fast enough. But in terms of raw damage mitigation, the chance I would see, if you really wanted to put one in, would be changing Earthshield. Like I said, when I spoke to the developer at BlizzCon, he basically said to me that if any spell's going to get cut from Restoration, it's probably going to be Earthshield, because it doesn't have much gameplay there. It's not fun, you just kind of keep it up, it's just there, it's not exciting. So I would like to either see Earthshield removed or maybe turned into more of a cooldown. Shaman don't really have that damage mitigation, but that's not really how they play when it comes to healing, so I'm fine with that not being a thing. Like I said, only other issue I have is Spirit Link Totem. I want to make sure I can still move it. That's a piece of personal feedback, but if they choose that you can't move Spirit Link Totem, it's going to kind of restrict how you use it, which is going to be a little bit disappointing at first, but I feel like we'll eventually figure it out. And the raid leaders will stop saying, like, oh, Spirit Link, and, oh, over there, just project it over. Because in situations where the raid gets thrown about and stuff, I think that it would be good to be able to move it. Like on Tyrant Valhari, when she knocks you around on Mythic, I always project the totem around to make sure that we all land in it, we all still share health, and we're all still healthy. So it would kind of reduce the utility, I think, so I'm curious to see how that will work. But yes, that is the Shaman in Legion, a bit of a preview. I look forward to the beta. I really hope I can get into it to kind of show you more of the Shaman and show you how it's changed in every little lovely little detail and all that stuff. So let me know what you think in the comments of the Shaman. Let me know what you think in the comments of the new stuff I have in terms of visuals and audio, because I've got some new stuff. Let me know what you think. If it's too intrusive, you like it, you don't like it, let me know. Hopefully we can get back into it, start making videos again. I've got some cool ideas. I'm super excited. BlizzCon has really enthused me. I've got a whole new focus. Well, not a new focus. I've just got a focus for the channel now. I am focusing really hard on it. I want to move towards some other things. I'll talk about it in another video because I don't want this to go too long. So let's wrap it up. Love the changes. Super excited for them. Feedback would be, let us see the talents, because talents are going to be so important in Legion. They've made that distinction, and we haven't even discussed how artifact weapons are going to affect how this works, because they've obviously going to, and legendary kind of trinkets and stuff like that are going to be dropping from the world, and tier bonuses, and there's so much stuff to put on top of this. Hopefully it doesn't get too convoluted, and hopefully the Shaman will be fun to play, deal some decent damage, not be as weak as it was early expansion, so that it can scale a little bit less hard, but still be strong early expansion. I really hope they can get that right. Oh, I will be all over them if they don't, I swear, because I am tired of having a shitty early expansion, only to get a little bit better as you get more gear and tier bonuses and the like. So, those are my thoughts on the Shaman. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I wish you the best of luck in the world of Warcraft, and I will see you folks next time.